Well, President Trump has announced plans to send National Guard troops to Memphis. All this comes after similar deployments to Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., where he said the Guard helped to fix local issues. Memphis had a record number of homicides in 2023 with 390, but police say the crime is down significantly so far this year. Speaking on Fox this morning, the president said the city's mayor and the governor of Tennessee both welcomed the federal assistance.
The mayor is happy, and the governor, Tennessee, the governor is happy. Deeply troubled. We're going to fix that just like we did Washington.
Memphis Mayor Paul Young said later that he did not ask for the National Guard, and he doesn't think it's the way to drive down crime. Governor Bill Lee confirmed the deployment was coming. He said he planned to speak with the president to work out the details.
All right, for more perspective, we're joined now by Hal Kempfer, a former Marine intelligence officer and Homeland Security expert. Hal, it's good to see you. We appreciate the time. So unlike the National Guard deployments that we saw here in California recently, in this case, the governor of Tennessee, a Republican, is welcoming the troops into his state. How does that change the way this deployment is likely to play out?
Alex, it could change it a lot. You know, in California, they were under what's called Title X, federal authority. They were federalized National Guard troops. The governor didn't ask for them. In fact, it was pretty clear that Governor Newsom didn't want them. And this is different. This is, Governor Lee is Republican. He's asked for them in. Now, Mayor Young doesn't, I would say, acquiesce to them coming in. I wouldn't say he was enthusiastic per se. But they're being asked to go in. And the question is, what status will they be in? Because that status will determine what they can do. Could they do law enforcement? If they're under Title X, they can't do law enforcement. That's in compliance with the Posse Comitatus Act. If they're under the governor's authority, they could do law enforcement, which is very possible because they're not in federal status. And then there's this gray area. And it's going to be an interesting question. It happened during the Obama administration, where they were letting them use Title 32, which is a federal status, but it doesn't change the chain of command under the governor. They were letting them do that for disasters and other events where they keep them in Title 32 status, where they're federally paid for, but they're not under federal presidential authority. I'm going to be kind of waiting to see exactly how they get deployed and how they're going to be utilized.
Okay, so how does one go about making that determination? I mean, is it as simple as the governor and the president sitting down and having a conversation and the governor making that call?
Actually, Heather, it could be that simple. They could just work out the details. There's another organization called the National Guard Bureau. It's back near Washington, D.C. That's the head of all the National Guards. They're probably working out all the planning on this and figuring out which status they come in. The cleanest status would be under state active duty. The problem is, if it's under state active duty, it's being paid for by the state. And, I'm sure that Tennessee isn't looking at, getting these troops in there just so they can pay the whole bill. So they're probably going to go to the president and say, hey, can you foot part of the bill? That's where Title 32 will come up. They might get challenged. That might be a court challenge that somebody brings up, say, hey, if they're federally funded, they're federal troops. That's been a big question for military lawyers for many years. Can you really do what we've been doing? This may actually put that question eventually before the Supreme Court.
Yeah, maybe sort of settle that legal question. Hal, let me ask you, we've obviously seen thousands of National Guard troops on the ground in Washington, D.C. now for quite some time, deployed there by the president. What do you think we can learn from that situation and the role that those service members are playing in the nation's capital to try to better understand what we may see in a city like Memphis?
That's where you might see another similarity. Now, obviously, the District of Columbia, very different. It's a federal district. There's no state. There's no sovereign state. There's no governor. They're always in federal status. So it's a completely different situation. However, they are being asked to come in by the governor. All right. That's who the president would interface with on this. They're being brought in the city. And even though there's no way that the federal government could federalize the Memphis police force, they are being brought in a cooperative fashion so they could be working with the Memphis police force. They could actually be working with them very close to what you saw similar. I don't want to draw too many similarities, but kind of like what happened in '92 in Los Angeles, where various troops, Marines and National Guard, were brought in under federal status and working with law enforcement. In that case, it was a massive civil unrest situation. The Insurrection Act was in. but you might see something like that where they deploy small units of National Guard working with law enforcement, and then law enforcement does all the direct law enforcement stuff, and they support them in a more of a protection status or backup status.
Hal, can we just talk for a moment about the troops themselves? I mean, are they fatigued with these deployments? How's morale, do you think?
I think that really depends on which troops come in. These probably won't be the same troops. I can't rule that out. But they probably won't be the same troops that went to Washington, D.C. They won't be the same troops that went to Los Angeles. The National Guard is big, hundreds of thousands of troops. I would imagine they're going to bring in other troops. The first troops they probably bring in are Tennessee National Guard, but then they might use a thing called the EMAC, Emergency Mutual Assistance Compact, to bring in National Guard troops from other states. So they themselves, those units, may not be fatigued because they may have never been mobilized to do something like this, unless, of course, they're doing something like natural disasters or something akin to that.
Hal, in terms of sort of the big picture here, we are continuing to see National Guard troops sent into cities. We may see this happen in Memphis here. Do you have any concerns, given your military background, about relying too heavily on the military to police American cities? And you think this is something that we should be normalizing?
Well, as a general rule of thumb, there's always been strong resistance going back for a very, very long time about the military being used in a law enforcement role. That's where posse comitatus came from. Didn't come from a concern about that per se. Actually, was a completely different reason why posse comitatus was put into law in 1878. But since then, there's always been a strong concern about the military being used for police functions, because we've seen around the world where the military comes in, and a lot of times you have the military on the streets. Next thing you know, you have some sort of autocratic thing. You know, we've seen in other countries where they have military coups, and we've always wanted to keep that separation, keep the military apolitical, keep them out of the political process, not being seen as something that would help one party or another or help one president or another in an unfair fashion. So the more they get used, the more some are going to say that line is starting to become a little blurry.
All right. Hal Kempfer, as always, appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Alex.
All right, we want to turn now.